Welcome back for the Anne of Green Gables Read Aloud, chapters 5 and 6. Here we go. It was not long after Anne's arrival that Rachel came up the lane to Green Gables. She had heard what happened and wasted no time in coming to inspect Anne for herself. Anne was out in the orchard. She'd been spending every free moment exploring Green Gables, delightedly roaming among shady trees and flowers. She wanted to get acquainted with everything, the apple trees and the fir trees, the maples and the wild cherries. She wanted to make friends with the spring in the willow, the log bridge over the brook, and the wooded hill that lay beyond. But when she heard Marilla calling, she came running into the kitchen at once, eager to make a good impression. "Well, they certainly didn't pick you for your looks," Rachel declared. "Did you ever see such freckles? And hair as red as carrots?" Anne's smile faded in an instant. "How dare you say such things about me?" she cried, stamping her foot. "Anne!" exclaimed Marilla. But Anne had not finished. "How would you like to have nasty things said about you? How would you like to be told that you're a rude, impolite, unfeeling woman? I'll never forgive you, never!" Then she rushed upstairs, slamming every door behind her. In the shocked silence of the kitchen, Marilla opened her mouth to apologize. But to her surprise, what she actually said was, "Rachel, you shouldn't have criticized her looks." Rachel rose from her chair, astonished and indignant. "I can see that I'll have to be careful what I say after this," she declared. "I won't visit here again if I'm to be insulted in such a fashion." And with that she swept out. Upstairs Marilla found Anne lying on the bed, crying bitterly. "Anne, that was a shameful way to act," she said. "I couldn't help it," wailed Anne. "Imagine how you would feel if someone said those things about you." Marilla was about to scold her when she remembered something. Once, when she was small, she had overheard one of her aunts saying, "What a pity Marilla is such a homely little thing." The memory of it still stung. "I don't say that Miss Lynde was right," she said, speaking more gently. "But she was my visitor and you were rude. You must tell her you're sorry and ask her to forgive you." "Shut me up in the dark, damp dungeon full of snakes and toads and I shall not complain," said Anne with a shudder. "But I cannot ask Miss Lynde to forgive me." "We're not in the habit of shutting people up in dungeons. They're rather scarce in Avonlea," Marilla pointed out dryly. "But you must apologize, and you'll stay in your room until you do." The next day Anne did not appear at breakfast or at dinner time. She barely touched the meals that Marilla carried up, and Matthew began to worry. Waiting until Marilla was out in the garden, he tiptoed upstairs and tapped on Anne's door. "Don't you think you'd better apologize?" he whispered. Anne was sitting by the window, managing to look both brave and mournful. "I would do it for you, Matthew, if you really want me to," she said. "Of course I do. It's lonesome downstairs without you. Just go and smooth it over." Then Matthew hurried off to the furthest corner of the pasture in case Marilla should guess he had been meddling. Marilla was relieved when Anne called down to say that she would apologize after all. But she was quite unprepared for what happened when they arrived at Rachel's house. The moment Anne saw Rachel, she sank dramatically to her knees, clutching her hands together. "Oh, Miss Lynde, I am so extremely sorry," she exclaimed. "I could never express my sorrow, not if I used up a whole dictionary. I behaved terribly, and I've disgraced my dear friends Matthew and Marilla, who have let me stay at Green Gables even though I'm not a boy. Every word you said was true. My hair is red and I'm freckled. What I said to you was true too, only I shouldn't have said it. Please say you forgive me." Marilla stared in astonishment, but Rachel only saw that Anne had made a very thorough apology. "Of course I forgive you. I guess I was too hard on you," she said at once, adding, "Your hair is terribly red, but I knew a girl once whose hair was just the color of yours, and when she grew up it darkened to a real handsome auburn." "Oh, Miss Lynde, you have given me hope," gasped Anne. "I could endure anything if I thought my hair would one day be a handsome auburn." Later, Anne and Marilla walked home together up the lane, where the wind was whispering in the treetops. "I apologized pretty well, didn't I?" said Anne proudly. You did it theatrically, all right, said Marilla, her lips twitching. I hope you'll control your temper from now on. Anne promised to try. She looked toward Green Gables, where cheerful light from the windows was gleaming through the trees. She slipped her hand into Marilla's. It's lovely to be going home, she said. Chapter 6. After breakfast one morning, while she was helping with the dishes, Anne suddenly asked, Marilla, do you think I shall ever have a kindred spirit here in Avonlea? A what? Asked Marilla in surprise. Why, a friend. Someone to whom I can confide my inmost soul. When I lived with Miss Thomas, I used to pretend my reflection in the looking-glass was a girl named Katie Morris. It broke my heart when I had to leave her behind. A real-life friend would soon put such nonsense out of your head, said Marilla crisply. Diana Barry is a nice girl, and she's about your age. I'll take you over to meet her this afternoon. Oh, Marilla, I'm frightened. What if she shouldn't like me? Diana will like you well enough. Just be polite and don't make any of your startling speeches. When they arrived at the Barrys' house, Anne was on her best behavior. Mrs. Barry welcomed them in, and Marilla said, This is Anne. Spelled with an E, added Anne breathlessly. Diana was sitting, reading to her 3-year-old sister, Minnie May, but she jumped up at once when Anne and Marilla came in. She was a merry-looking girl with black hair and rosy cheeks. I'm awfully glad you've come to live at Green Gables, she said to Anne. It will be jolly to have somebody to play with. Mrs. Barry sent the 2 girls out into the garden. After they had smiled at each other bashfully for a while, Anne clasped her hands. Diana, do you think you can like me a little? Enough to promise to be my friend forever? Diana laughed. Why, I guess so. Let's join hands, said Anne gravely. I'll take the oath first. I solemnly swear to be faithful to my friend, Diana Barry, as long as the sun and the moon shall endure. Now you say it. Diana repeated the oath. I heard you were a strange girl, Anne, but I believe I'm going to like you real well. Over the next few weeks, Diana and Anne were rarely apart. Then one afternoon, Anne came flying into the kitchen, her eyes shining. Diana says there's to be a picnic next week at the Lake of Shining Waters. I've never been to a picnic, and there's to be ice cream. Just think! Oh, Marilla, can I go? When Marilla said that she could, Anne flung her arms around her and kissed her cheek. Never mind your kissing nonsense, said Marilla gruffly. Get out your patchwork and let's hear no more about this picnic. But for the rest of the week, Anne talked picnic and thought picnic and dreamed picnic. The day before the great event, she was anxiously watching the sky for rain clouds when Marilla came into the kitchen with a troubled face. Anne, have you seen my amethyst brooch? She asked. Marilla wore her amethyst brooch every Sunday. It was her most treasured possession, and Anne thought it was perfectly beautiful. I saw it in your room this afternoon, admitted Anne. I took it and pinned it on for a moment just to see how it would look. It's very wrong to meddle with things that don't belong to you, Marilla scolded. Where did you put it? Back where I found it, on the bureau, said Anne. Truly I did. But it was not on the bureau. Marilla searched her room and then all over the house, but the amethyst brooch was nowhere to be found. Marilla felt more and more worried. There could be no doubt that Anne had lost the brooch. Worse still, she was lying, and telling lies was much worse than a fit of temper. She went to the East Gable room in search of Anne. You have told me a falsehood, she said sternly. You'll stay here until you admit it. But the picnic is tomorrow, Anne gasped. You won't keep me from going. You'll go to no picnics nor anywhere else until you've confessed. Oh, Marilla, cried Anne in horror, but Marilla had gone out and shut the door. The next morning dawned bright and fair. Before breakfast, Anne came downstairs looking pale and determined. I'm ready to confess, she announced dramatically. I did take the brooch. I took it down to the Lake of Shining Waters so I could imagine I was the Lady Cordelia Fitzgerald. But then it slipped through my fingers and went down, down, down into the water and sank forevermore. I know I'll have to be punished, so won't you get it over with right away so I can go to the picnic? Marilla felt a hot burst of anger. Anne, this is terrible. You certainly won't be going to the picnic now. But you promised me I could. That's why I confessed. Anne ran to her room and flung herself down in tears. My heart is broken, she sobbed. It was a dismal morning. Anne stayed in her room and would not come out. Don't you think you were pretty rough not to let her go? Asked Matthew. She shouldn't have taken the brooch or told stories, but she's just a child. Yet Marilla stood firm. Dinner was not a cheerful meal. Matthew was even quieter than usual, and Marilla felt uneasy. Afterward, she tried to distract herself with chores, and then, while she was in the bedroom putting away her best black lace shawl, she caught sight of something sparkling in its folds. It was the amethyst brooch. It had been there all along. Marilla marched straight to Anne's room with the brooch in her hand. What was all that nonsense you told me? You said I couldn't go to the picnic until I'd confessed, sniffed Anne. So I decided to confess and make it as interesting as I could. But you wouldn't let me go after all, so my trouble was wasted. In spite of herself, Marilla began to laugh. Anne, you do beat all. I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted you. If you'll forgive me, I'll forgive you and we'll start again. Now, get yourself ready for the picnic. There's still time. Anne delighted in every moment of that picnic, the splendid tea, picking water lilies, and rowing on the lake of shining waters. She even relished the excitement when Jane Andrews nearly fell overboard. I wish it had been me. It would be such a thrilling experience, she sighed to Diana. Anne returned home with so much to say that she couldn't get the words out fast enough. I had a perfectly scrumptious time. Scrumptious is a new word I learned today. Isn't it expressive? And oh, Marilla, the ice cream! Words fail me to describe it, but I assure you it was sublime. Later, when Anne was in bed, Marilla told the whole story to Matthew. One thing's certain, she admitted with a smile. Green Gables will never be dull while Anne's in it. Here's some more questions. Ready? Okay. During chapters 5 and 6, Anne has two major moments that upset Marilla. One involved the neighbor, Miss Rachel, right? What could Anne or Marilla have done differently to help these moments be happier? So, think of when she lost the brooch, or she didn't lose the brooch. Marilla thought she lost the brooch. Telling the truth and apologizing helped it feel better, right? When Marilla apologized. Or when Anne apologized to the neighbor, oh, so romantically, everything was better, right? So I think apologizing made those moments happier.